This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Purse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamill.
I'm so much more comfortable collecting real estate than I am collecting other stuff.
We just interviewed Brian Alfaro and Cody Laughlin from Blue Oak Capital, and I'm feeling ready to run through a wall. How about you, Bill?
I know they mentioned that before we had this episode, that they've had some events over the past 3 or 4 days which have jacked them up, and they're ready to run through a wall and world domination and everything else. And me being in the business so long, it just is a testament that you never stop learning in this business. I learned just so much from these guys in just this episode. And, particularly seeing how you can go big, but how you can go big, getting specific on the mindset and what you have to do and what you have to ask, and the way to attract the big dogs to be involved in your big deals.
Yeah, that feeling of motivation is definitely contagious. They started out with smaller single-family homes, and they wanted to scale up. And you hear that story all the time, but it doesn't always translate into actually being able to scale. And fast forward a couple of years, these guys are under contract on a 400-unit building. It's just so impressive what they're doing.
Absolutely. And they convinced themselves that as soon as they got into that scaling, the sky was the limit. So, no, we're not looking to scale to 20 units or 150 units. We know the possibilities. We know the recipe to get there. So we're doing 400 units.
Yep, they were very focused, very intentful, and it's working out.
Great episode.
This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. We are very lucky this morning to be joined by Cody and Brian from Blue Oak Capital. Can you guys tell us a little bit more about your real estate background?
Sure. Yeah. Well, Bill, Stephen, I want to thank you guys so much for having us on the show. It's always a pleasure to share our story. But my background as far as real estate started back in 2010. I became an accidental landlord while working a W-2. And that was my crash course into becoming a real estate entrepreneur. Read the Purple Bible, the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book that everybody knows. Shortly thereafter, and at the time, I was in the process of pursuing an opportunity to go up the corporate healthcare career ladder. And I read that book and I was like, oh, real estate makes so much more sense now. So I started going down the entrepreneurship path, and along the way, tried some other business ventures that didn't pan out, but learned a lot of expensive lessons, got recommitted and refocused back to real estate. And after realizing that I wasn't scaling quick enough in single family residential real estate, I decided to make a pivot, and made that pivot to focus exclusively on multifamily around early 2019. Was fortunate enough to have met our first partner, John, while working on some other opportunities. And then we met Brian midway through last year, and it's been off to the races since. A lot of great things to date. We're general partners in 391 units, and then under contract for another 396 units now. So we'll be at 800 units as general partners before the end of the year. So that's my story, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll echo Cody's statement about thanks for having us on the show. Super excited to be here. My real estate journey started in 2018. My wife and I were buying our first house, and really just noticing a lot of the books and this content I was reading on how to properly buy your first house was always talking a little bit about real estate investing. And I'm somebody who likes to challenge myself, and I was always, looking for ways to build that generational wealth, to change my family tree, to do all the things that, we get into real estate for. And I felt like real estate was a really powerful tool. Connected the dots that a lot of really successful people either found their success through real estate or helped keep a lot of their success, a lot of their wealth by owning assets, by, buying real estate. Had a very limiting mindset though. Didn't know what I didn't know, and started small and single family. So did that for about 18 months, went down the education rabbit hole and, found bigger pockets, found a bunch of people that were still connected to this day, and, was just getting, coaching and guidance and doing a lot of self-education on how to buy rentals, how to flip houses, how to wholesale, do all that. And, did some of that, picked up some rentals, did some wholesale deals, was doing some transactions on the realtor side, was kind of dipping my toes in all the buckets to figure out which one made the most sense for me. But along that journey, I realized that I wasn't really enjoying it very much. And part of the reason was, in my opinion, it had a low return on effort. I still think you can build tremendous wealth by buying single family rentals, but I really wanted to scale, and I really wanted to build a business and have partners along the way, because it is a tremendous amount of work. Even if you've got an unlimited pool of capital and that's not a problem for you, it's still a lot of work finding a good deal, rehabbing it, dealing with contractors, then refinancing it, just mortgage after mortgage after mortgage. So late 2019, early 2020 really slowed down and started to focus on, what do I want to do? Thinking about that. And COVID hit around that time, which I always tell people sort of became a blessing for me, because it forced me to slow down my thinking. Things were moving very fast at that time. And that's when I attended a multifamily boot camp, met our first partner, John. And I was already, vetting a few other mentorship groups at the time, ended up joining the mentorship group that we're now all in, and got connected with Cody and realized, wow, like, these two guys are awesome. We have an alignment of interest, not only on the real estate front, but they're just good people. And everybody wants to do business with good people first before you get into all the dollars and cents. So stayed connected and was invited to join their team over at Blue Oak Capital mid last year. And as Cody said, we've been off to the races. Focused last year on building our database, really just nurturing relationships and networking with a lot of really high quality operators, so that we can make big things happen in the space. And as you mentioned, we're right around 400 units right now. Got another 396 or so under contract and another deal, and currently raising capital for that. And we're off to the races. We feel pretty good about 2022.
Fantastic. I appreciate how it's so common where so many people came from experimenting with the one family game and realized through trials and tribulations that it's not going to work. You're not going to be able to build that wealth that you really desire and then turn to scaling. So I can see that you guys had that in common. And then you both mentioned John. So once we have all also figured out getting into that scaling game, I can see you guys in a short period of time put together the Blue Oak team, one person at a time. Can you describe how that all fell in place? I know that you met each other at different periods of times and different events, and what it looked like to put that team together, because we all know that the team has to complement each other, so you can have that all-star team, so to speak.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Bill. I mean, when you're looking to work with other people in the space and partner with other people, you first have to figure out what your value add proposition is. What is the one thing that you can bring to a partnership that will complement the team? And I know when I first started in my focus or journey into multifamily, I was kind of wearing all the hats. I was doing everything on my own. And, that was starting the thought leadership platforms, building up the network, starting to do some branding, and I was having trouble. I mean, it's a lot of work, as we all know, right? It's too much work for one person, and I would argue it's almost even too much for three sometimes, right, Brian? But anyway, so I think it was through putting myself out there and taking action, though, that led me into opportunities that at the time I wasn't ready for, but it was a blessing because it got me connected with, again, John. And so John and I had an opportunity to sit down at the table and say, hey, ask the question, what is your value add proposition? What are you doing? What do you need help with? And here's how I can fit that. And that was a great conversation. But it wasn't an immediate marriage. And I'll tell you, you have to take your time vetting the people you work with, right? I mean, we went through exercises together, working with one another, analyzing deals, going on property tours, talking through different aspects of the business to make sure that there was that true alignment of interest. And once we went through enough of those exercises, that's when it was like, okay, now let's make this official. Because at the time we figured each other out, right? We knew what each other was bringing to the table, and then what our visions were moving forward for the company. And then you fast forward, I don't know, about maybe 6 months or so, and then coincidentally, same thing with Brian. And I'll let Brian share his story in meeting John, but it was just a very similar synergy.
Yeah, definitely similar synergies as Cody mentioned. And I met John at a Neil Bawa boot camp, so we're all familiar with Neil and the great content he puts out. And it was I think it was around the time COVID had hit. It might have been April of last year, and we were all in the Zoom chat just saying, "Okay, guys, my name's so and so. I live in wherever. Reach out to me." And I can't remember if John reached out to me or I reached out to John, but we connected. We got on a call, and it's a great call. We spent about an hour together, just chit chatting. And I think we all know John. John's easy to talk to. He's a good guy. He's easy to connect with. He's really, really smart, really sharp too, and adds a lot of value from a relationship standpoint, whether you're doing business with him or you're just a friend. So figured, he had told me that he had a partner, and I'm like, okay, well, if his partner is anything like him, John, then this is probably a pretty good relationship, a pretty good couple of guys to consider working with. But Cody hit the nail on the head when figuring out what your value proposition was. When I met them at the time, Cody, when I first got into multifamily, I thought I was going to be doing what I was doing in the single family side. And that was like deal hunting, dealing with brokers and finding deals, going off market, talking to sellers, that kind of thing. But when I joined the team or started to figure out what the structure of the team was, like Cody was already taking that thing by the horns, and he was doing a way better job than I could have done, especially starting from scratch. So there made no sense for me to be the acquisitions guy, right? So at that point, I need to take a step back and look at my skill sets and figure out like where can I sort of be a value add? Where can I be that what puzzle piece can I sort of fill in? And me having a hospitality background, owning a couple of small businesses, being very active in customer service and things of that nature, and marketing and brand building, that was a big need for them at the time, because Cody's the guy who's up till 2-3 in the morning working hard every day, and you can only do so much of that, and it's really hard to build your brand doing that all by yourself. So that was a big value add for them. They needed help with building their investor database, dealing with investor relations, building the brand, doing the marketing, stuff like that, and also being operational minded, so that when we did find that first deal, being able to actually asset management, manage the manager, right? That was my big value add, and it was something they needed. So the relationship just all came together and made a lot of sense.
I'm really impressed. It's so powerful to be able to put together a team where your values are aligned, your skill sets are aligned, and you work well together. And it's not easy to do, but when you can pull it off, it's so powerful. A lot of things I want to touch on here, but I want to go back to, you mentioned a 396 unit being under contract. We can't just go over that lightly. I mean, that's a huge deal. Tell us more about that.
They're just numbers, right, Cody?
Yeah, it's just another zero at the end of the line. But no, we're blessed to have opportunities, right? And I think what people see, and even sometimes we reflect, right? The success we've had this year has been tremendous. I mean, it's been an exciting year, and we've been very, very fortunate. But, when you peel back and you look behind the curtain, there's really accumulation of about 2 years of work, that went into positioning ourselves into finding those opportunities, right? And so, just as what we have probably alluded to already, but, when you're putting yourself out there and identifying and telling the world what your value proposition is and how that could be a benefit to somebody, that's where you start to figure out or find opportunities. And, we went out intentfully last year expanding our database of not only, passive investors that may want to partner with us or other co-GPs that want to partner with us, but also successful operators in the space. Who's out there doing deals? Who's out there that has the track records and experiences that we want to have ourselves and want to be a part of, and started building relationships with those guys, And so we had some relationships that we'd been nurturing for some time. This year, once things opened back up from COVID, we were, full force, ready to go in our acquisition mode again. And we, we're putting ourselves out there with brokers and analyzing deals that were probably a little bit too bigger than our bandwidth. But through that, we were able to knock on the doors of these successful operators and say, hey, we'd love to partner with you guys if you think we're a fit. And it was through that where we found ourselves in our first partnership earlier this year with the lead sponsor, who is also one of the lead sponsors on this 396 unit. And because we had that alignment of interest, that partnership, and that experience with them on the first deal, they invited us to come in on the second deal. So we're really excited about it. It's a 396 unit A-class deal right outside of Fort Worth. It's just beautiful, beautiful, what we like to call trophy asset. But, again, it all came through hard work, opportunity, and putting yourself out there.
Yeah, and I think something to highlight too, gentlemen, is Cody sort of alluded to this a little bit, but stepping outside of your comfort zone, right? Cody said we were submitting offers and looking at deals that were arguably outside of our bandwidth, right? Sometimes when we're in this business, we think we're thinking big because maybe 3 years ago or 5 years ago, who would have ever thought you were buying a 50 unit, right? Or a 40 unit? But what stops you? It's the same amount of work. What stops you from buying a 300 unit or a 400 unit? Like, it's the same effort. It's the same transactional process, dealing with a broker, finding the equity, taking the acquisition and taking the deal down. It's just, it comes down to, I think the message is, who do you know that can help you get this deal done, right? And how much are you willing to give up of it as well, right? How big are you willing to build the team? But I think that's definitely been our theme since the beginning. And Cody's done a great job keeping us on track, because this business is tough. And every now and again, you're like, man, we're chasing all these 150, 200 units and it's just not working. Maybe we should go look at the 20 units. And Cody's like, no, let's stay focused on what we're trying to do and find a way to build our team to make it happen no matter what.
Yeah, it's like anything else in this business, right? It doesn't happen overnight, and it takes patience. And I mentioned in my bio, I went through a couple of opportunities that were non-real estate related business opportunities. It was chasing shiny objects is what it was, right? And it led me down a derailed path for several years that were very costly, expensive lessons that I've learned. But to Brian's point, now it's like, when you figure out what your thesis is and who you are as an investor, you have to put the blinders on and you have to be laser focused. You can't deviate. And as frustrating as it's going to be, because you're going to have that emotional roller coaster where you feel like, man, all this work is not translating to anything, or you're not seeing the success yet. You have to be patient and you have to just stick with it, because ultimately opportunities will eventually show and all that hard work will start to align. And that's exactly really what propelled us this year, is all that work started coming together. And once it takes off, man, it's a rocket. So you just got to hang on. So.
Wow, there's a lot going on there, which is unbelievable. I jotted down a few things that are so powerful, but I have to go back, because you mentioned a few times where you ask, originally John and probably Brian at the time, what is your value add proposition? What I've learned over so many years, good questions get great answers. And I know Brian mentioned that you were the acquisition guy when he came in, and he had to find his spot and get into the investor relations. Is that great question? What is your value add proposition? Do you approach all aspects of your business with a question like that, or anything similar, to try to get great answers and get that dialogue going?
No, I definitely wouldn't say you just come out of the gate and say, hey, what is your value proposition? Obviously you want to start an organic relationship and conversation to figure out who it is you're talking to. But I think it starts with you first. You need to figure out what your value add proposition is and what is your skill set, and tell the people that you're networking with that. So that way, as you're building out your database, you can start discovering who is it that has a complementary skill set. If I'm out there networking and I'm telling people, hey, I'm the head of acquisitions over at Blue Oak Capital, and here's what we're looking for. Bill, you may be the capital raiser. You may hate the idea of going out and trying to find the deals, but you may love networking and bringing capital to the table. And so, but you have to be able to tell the world who it is that you are and what are you doing. And I always joke, I tell people, like, if you think about networking events, how often do you go to a networking event and you shake somebody's hand and you say, "Oh, how's the weather?" And then, you kind of have a little banter back and forth about the weather. And then it's like you stand there awkwardly wondering what's next. you know, you hear this often, but you have to have your elevator pitch, and you have to be able to, in a way, sell yourself to others when you're networking, so that way they know exactly who you are, and so you can start figuring out who they are. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I'm actually at the event we were at yesterday. I took a picture because Robert Martinez and George and Ellis were saying when you're talking to people, you need to be able to communicate your why. And I'm looking at this now, and it says your why needs to be, and it's an acronym, and they use the acronym RICE, RICE. It needs to relate to your audience, inspire them to learn more, convince them you're the solution, and elicit an emotional response, right? So that's super powerful messaging, relating to people, inspiring them to want to learn more about you, convincing them you're the problem to what they're looking for, right? So if you're the guy with the deals and you need dollars, you need to be able to convince that guy with the deals that you're the dollars, you're the guy who's going to fix their problems, or vice versa, right? And then eliciting emotional response, creating emotion, right? Just letting them know that you're passionate about what you do, not looking like you're somebody who is not excited about being in real estate, having that energy. I mean, Grant Cardone's a great example, right? Those guys, Robert Martinez, great example of people that are, every time you hear them speak, you feel like you can run through a wall when you're done, right? Be that way with your acquisitions, be that way with your investor relations, be that way if you're in asset management. Be passionate about what you do. And that's going to naturally come across. You don't need to have a t-shirt on that says, I raise money or I find deals. You can just share your story, have that why ready to go, let them know what you do, and people are going to naturally start calling you. We get calls all the time for different reasons, analyzing deals, looking at stuff, helping with equity, different situations, and it's because the world knows what we do, and we try to make sure we don't leave a room without people knowing that.
So, what has been the most important factor that lets the world know what you do? The fact that you get calls is so impressive. The fact that you have your why ready to go is also impressive. But you need to be standing in front of someone in order to deliver that why. How do you get in front of people? How do you get these incoming calls? And what's your process for being able to tell the world what you do?
Well, I think it starts with being intentful, right? It's being intentful in every aspect of your business, both from your branding and your marketing, your social media presence, your networking. And I think it starts with, again, going back to you looking yourself in the mirror and figuring out who you are, what's your investing thesis, what is your goal, and what's the path to take you to that goal, right? And so, if I'm looking to raise capital and I'm going to networking events, I want to be intentful about finding the passive investors in the room that may want to partner with me, versus, going to spend time with the, the busboy at the restaurant who's not really going to be adding any value to me. And not to say you shouldn't be networking with everybody, but you get my point. It's about being very specific and intentful in your approach in every aspect of your business. And I know it's a very simple answer, but that's really the thing. And I think through us being very intentful on who we sharing our message on who Blue Oak Capital is through our branding, through our marketing, through our networking efforts, and now sharing with the world what it is that we're doing in our business, that's really what has led to the opportunities, I think, where people are reaching out. And look, it's definitely a humbling experience when somebody's calling and considering us for a partnership. And so we can't appreciate that enough. But again, think it just goes back to just being very specific in our approach and intentful in our business.
Yeah, I would agree with that. You want to have a loud microphone. We're fortunate enough. We have a podcast, we have a virtual meetup, we have an in-person meetup, we have a website that we keep updated, we have a newsletter, we have a blog. Like there's all these things that we sort of have to stay top of mind. And I will, mention that, especially social media, people are constantly watching what you're doing, even if they're not liking your posts and even if they're not commenting on your posts. So you have to be very intentful with the delivery of your messages, and don't be, this is we're very humble. This business, we're just getting started. We're nowhere near where we want to be in 3 years and 5 years, but you have to celebrate your wins and you have to let the world know about your wins, because that's how you're going to attract high quality people into your circle, whether they be passive investors who now finally trust you to take some of their hard-earned money and put it to work in real estate because you've done 2, 3, 4 deals, whatever, or other active operators that see what you're doing and want to get on a call and say, hey, you know, how'd you guys do this? What'd you guys bring to the table? Was it equity? Was it the deal? Are you asset management? And they keep you in mind, especially if the conversations are very, professional, and they see like, wow, these guys are professional. They know what they're talking about. They know what they're doing. They're not trying to be in this for short term. They're trying to be in it for the long term. Those 15, 30-minute calls that you have, it's not uncommon that we talk to somebody and then, I don't know, Cody, 3, 6, 9, 12 months later, they're calling you back because they want to find a way to work with you. They've got something under contract, or they're bringing you a deal and they want you to underwrite it and see if it makes sense and see if that you can, take the deal down with them. So just about building relationships is really what it's all about. And when you're building those relationships, letting people know, what it is that you do. And like I said, just having a loud microphone, that definitely helps too.
The insight that both of you have is amazing. It really is. And I've learned so much just from listening to you guys, even though I've got to know you a bit over the past, 6 or 8 months. I have to go back when you guys are focusing on around 150 units and maybe not getting the traction that you're hoping. So then you're saying, hey, should we go to 20? Codys, no, we're going to 400. And I feel like that also is analogous to your presence. So I watch you guys as you go along on social media, as I see you at networking events, and you're everywhere. You're in my mind that part of the highlight of the events, as far as we're all in there together, but you guys are doing it at a super high level. And then I see it translating into doing a 400 unit deal where, okay, you have to raise this much money for your general partnership of that deal. And clearly you guys think big, but what is your mindset when you're talking, okay, we have to raise this amount of money. I know we have our database, but what's that investing money math? Because there's so much uncertainty in raising money, and how you're able to be that aggressive with that. What does that conversation sound like?
Yeah, when it comes to raising capital, it is arguably the most important skill set to have when you talk about this world of syndication. But, to your point, Bill, I think it's when you're putting yourself out there and you're putting in the work and you're showing up every day, your hope is that eventually those opportunities will start presenting themselves. Now, the question you have to ask yourself is, when the opportunities present themselves, are you going to take it? And that's the thing for us, is going back to even our very first opportunity. It was a 240 unit deal, deep value add project. It was a 506C raise. We hadn't done a 506C raise before. And when we were presented the opportunity, we had to look at ourselves. We had to have a discussion. You remember that, Brian, right? We're all on the phone and we're like, hey, and we're running through all the scenarios. Okay, if this works, great. If this doesn't, what are we going to do? All the pros and cons. And eventually it came back to, look, you've been asking for opportunity. It's right here in front of you. Are you going to go take it? And Brian, you alluded to this earlier, right? It's about getting out of your comfort zone. You find your success when you get outside of that comfort zone, when you get outside of your own boundary. And we went for it. And so, we had a lot of success on the first raise. We had a good opportunity on the second raise. And then here it is, the third raise. And like you said, it's a 396 unit and a monster, right? A-class deal, $20 million raise. And you're like, oh my God, what? What are we doing? We're trying to play in the majors and we're just getting out of T-ball, but again, the conversation was the same. Hey, here's an opportunity to propel our business. Are we going to take it? Are we just going to rest on our laurels and, kind of sit back in our comfort zone? And for us, Brian, we're go-getters, and, look, we're going to get our teeth kicked in, and it's going to be some pain along the way, but you got to take the bull by the horns, and you got to get yourself out there. And if you're asking for opportunity and it presents itself, you got to go get it. And so that's really, I mean, that's really all it took. Really was just kind of pushing ourselves and just saying, "Hey, we're going to make this work one way or the other."
Yeah, I think it goes back to a few things I'll point out. Is, one, when you look at really successful operators, the big dogs in the space, right? The Rod Cleaves, the Neil Bawas, the people that you really sort of Jake and Geno's, right? The people you look up to, and people say like, oh, they're so lucky, they've got all these great deals, blah blah blah, right? But there's a cheesy saying, I don't know who said it, but the definition of, when people say I make my own luck, and it's when opportunity and preparation cross paths, right? So we all spend, how much time do the four of us combined spend educating? It's a ridiculous amount of hours, right? It's way more than you would probably spend in 4 years of college, just educating yourself, networking, talking to people, watching YouTube videos, podcasts. The list is long of stuff that we do. So we're constantly preparing ourselves. But as Cody mentioned, when the opportunity comes, are we thinking too small that we're not ready, right? Now, obviously, you want to be careful not to over promise and then under deliver in these situations, right? That's super important. But at the same time, you have to mentally be ready for these opportunities. And I think it just goes back to, like we've been talking about, just thinking big. And it's, for us, we always say it's not how, it's who. Who do we need to talk to get this deal done? If we're looking at a $30 million deal, which is pretty not uncommon for us, we're usually looking at a $20-30 million range. And like, these capital stacks are $6 to $10 million of equity. Now, one day we want to be able to raise that ourselves, right, Cody, and not call anybody and just be done with it. It's just Blue Capital's deal, right? We're not at that point in our business yet. So then the question becomes, is who? Who do we know that can bring a substantial amount of equity to the table? Capital raisers essentially that want to co-GP with us, people we have great relationships with. And how many of them do we need? If we can raise two and somebody else can raise two and somebody else can raise two, boom, that's 6 million. It's 3 people, 3 partners, right? And you just get the deal done. It doesn't matter that it's a $25 million deal. You found 3 people to bring $2 million each of capital, and you get the deal done. You just stuck 150, 200 unit under your belt. Boom, done. But so you just really got to have good relationships and think big, and ask yourself, who do I know that can help me get this thing across the finish line? And I definitely, one thing Cody mentioned is you just got to go through these exercises, right? You're not going to win every deal, but that's okay. If you're looking at a 200 unit, act like you're about to win the deal. Start picking up the phone, asking guys like, hey, I'm looking at this 200 unit. Cody does this all the time. Let's call the big players in our market. Let's call the guys that got 10, 15, 20 assets, thousands of doors. And let's ask them like, hey, I'm looking at this deal. I'm talking to the broker. We want to get invest in final. What do you think about this deal? What would make it look good to you? What could you bring to the table? And after you form relationships with these guys are all, they're deal junkies. They want to do deals too. And they're just as busy as we are. So if you bring them into an opportunity, into a deal, they're very happy to come in and KP on the loan and bring some equity to the table and help push it over the finish line with the broker, because they've already closed 5-10 deals with the broker. It's all about who to get these deals done. And once you know good people in the space, man, the sky's the limit. You can buy whatever you want in this city if you've got the relationships and you can raise the equity.
Not How, but Who. It's a good book. You're both obviously hyper focused on executing within your criteria. I'm curious on what your criteria is specifically. You're both in the Texas area, I believe, and I think you mentioned that 396 unit is also in Texas. Are you solely focused on investing in the Texas market, or are you also looking at other markets?
Yeah, when it comes to figuring out your target market, I tell people don't try to search for properties in a market where you're not willing to travel. And it's very easy for most people to say, okay, well, I'm just going to start in my backyard. And for a lot of, we're blessed. We're in Houston, Texas, hot market. We're close proximity to some other large metro areas in this area that are hot. So most of our deal flow and our focus is coming out of Central Texas, just because there's so many opportunity here. But having said that, early in the year, we were looking at a few out-of-state markets that we had, either visited or had planned on visiting, that we were okay with traveling to and from if we needed to expand our horizons. But, ultimately, you have to become an expert at just 1 or 2 markets first before you spread yourself too thin, right? And if you don't take the time to really develop that footprint in that particular market, it's very, very easy to kind of start chasing other markets and then not really become an expert at any. So to answer your question, Stephen, yeah, most of our focus is Central Texas just because of the plentiful opportunity that we're seeing. There's a ton of deal flow coming out. And then as far as the actual criteria, I mean, we really like we really like the core plus assets right now. Your newer vintage product, we like the economies of scale. So, 100 to 250 units or so as what we've typically been targeting. But, right now we're in a very interesting place in this market cycle where there's cap rate compression across all asset types. There's really no delta between your C-class product and your A-class product. And, the return yields are so thin right now that you're underwriting on a value add deal that needs $2-3 million of capex injected, and it's giving you the same return profile as your A-class product. And so, for us, it was looking at it on a risk adjusted basis and saying, well, if you're going to have to go take that execution risk and putting all those dollars into a building just to get a 6 or 7% cash on cash, but here it is, I can go buy the nice, beautiful building with no deferred maintenance and no capex issues for roughly the same profile. Well, I'd rather just go pay that premium, right? So our focus has been kind of on the newer assets, call it, 1990s, 2000s or newer. Not to say we won't look at the value add projects. We still do underwrite those, but just not seeing enough exciting opportunity come out of that space compared to the A product. And so, and then we like the economies of scale, so the bigger we can go, the better. We're on a path to really grow rapidly. And so we have to go bigger to do that. And so, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I see that you're now looking A space. I know Canyon Club, which I looked at pretty closely, was a big value add. And now you're making that transition based on the market cycle and the thinning out of deals in one of the hottest markets in the country. And understanding it's all about relationships, because I agree 100% there. And you guys are in Texas. You've built up great relationships in Texas, finding Class A deals at this point, and you've built those relationships with the big players in the market. So as you discussed earlier, to do big deals, to raise a lot of money, you need to be talking to the big players. So when you're looking at these Class A deals and raising money, are you specifically now going to those big deal makers, those big property owners, and trying to fill them in alongside you as the GP and investing large chunks of money on these deals?
Yeah, going back to our conversation about being intentful, I think it's very, very important for people to understand that when you're going to other successful operators, waving a deal around and saying, "Hey, I've got this great deal, want to partner with me," is not the right approach, because
they've probably already
seen it, and they probably already passed on it for whatever their own particular reason is. But most importantly, if they're successful, really, why do they need you? And that's the thing. So going back to our conversation earlier, and not to beat the dead horse here, but it starts with relationships. Number one, you have to plant these seeds and you have to build these relationships organically over time. And you really have to figure out what is the value add proposition that you add to them as a successful operator. Taking them to coffee and lunch, it's not going to do it. Working for them for free, it's not going to do it. But what are some other opportunities that you could really capture to help add value to them to where they want to work with you? For example, we have a very successful operator in our network who's done, almost 20 plus acquisitions. He's buying deals on his own, but really has no marketing presence at all, and he hasn't really needed it, but now he's looking to expand that, but he needs help. And so, having been able to build that relationship with him and he sees what we're doing, he's asking us for almost consulting work, I guess, so to speak, right, Brian, to kind of help with some marketing efforts. And in exchange, it was like, hey, well, cool. Now we can go look at opportunities together, because We see the deals that he's buying. It's very much aligned with us. And he sees the work that we're putting in, right? But the other thing too, I'll tell you about being intentful is not only just having the relationship, but you have to be very specific in what you're asking these successful operators. And what do I mean by that? Flashing the deal in front of them and saying, hey, it's a great deal. It's not enough. But when you go to an operator and say, hey, Mr. Operator, I've already underwrote the deal. I've already done the preliminary due diligence. I've already got the vendor quotes from the insurance agent or the tax guy. Here's all the work. Here's how I would execute this property. Here's what I can bring to the table as far as equity. Excuse me. So sorry. Here's what I can bring to the table as far as earnest money, equity, whatever. Here's what I need from you, and here's what I'll give you in return. Does that something that fits your interest? And when you can get that specific and that targeted, that's where key opportunities you're going to find. That's where people are going to really see that you're credible. And so, again, it just goes back to being very intentful.
Yeah, those little details separate the credibility. I mean, it's not that we've got thousands and thousands of doors and decades of experience. It's that it's like a deal in a box. Like we present it to them and it's got everything they need to know. It's got the debt terms. We've got, our asset managers looked at it. We've got the insurance quote. We've got the tax assessment. We've got the underwriting. We've got the business plan. And here's what we need. And here's what we need from you. And here's what we can bring. It's very simple because these guys, Cody knows, they don't have a lot of time. And yeah, they probably seen the deal and they might like the deal, but maybe they don't have time to chase it right now because they are working on their own portfolio. They own 10, 15, 20 assets. They can't chase every deal. They don't have the time for that. So if you can be the one chasing the deal for them, they're very happy to hop in the deal with you in exchange for something, of course. But you have to know, it goes back to the whole message of this episode, is you have to know what your value add is and make it clear from day one.
Just from
that's
following
fantastic.
Blue
Go ahead,
Oak
Steve.
on social media, I can tell how specific and intentful your team is. After having a year with so much success, what do you plan for next? What's on the horizon for Blue Oak Capital?
World domination.
Boom. Great answer. Yeah, I think if you look at the evolution of the business, right, every year has just been leveling up. Every year it's been doubling down and just, results are starting to multiply. It's kind of that compound interest, right? And so, this year, 800 units under contract or completed as general partners. Next year, the goal is just to double down, and like I said, just continue to focus on our acquisitions and building out our portfolio, aligning with other successful operators that we can partner with and just keep riding this momentum and keep taking advantage of opportunity when it presents itself. So, as far as our goals, our goal is to get to $100 million of assets under management here over the next couple of years. And we believe in slow and steady wins the race. And so we take it one deal at a time. But, we definitely would like to get to that $100 million threshold because that just, you start getting into a whole new ballgame at that point. And so next year is just going to keep being one foot right in front of the other towards that path. Right, Brian?
That's right. And we're going to get Cody.
I'm surprised you didn't say 10X after meeting Cody.
Oh, man, look.
10X, baby. Let's do it.
He had me wanting to go buy all of Houston after leaving that meeting.
Yeah, and I was going to say, throw in there, definitely one of the goals too. I don't know if it'll happen next year, but we got to get Cody out of his W-2.
Yeah.
We're having a lot of success already. We're not rock stars by any means, but I feel like once we get that done, it's just going to build tremendous momentum because doing this, at 3 a.m. is much different than doing it during the day.
It's a little exhausting.
Yeah, it sounds like Cody needs some sleep because he's doing 2 full-time jobs here. I guess summarizing through this and good questions I've found have been super powerful with anything that you do or you're trying to achieve, but also language that we use has so much meaning where you guys are talking about getting outside your comfort zone, focus, patience, that big why, world domination. And, you can just take that type of language and see what your growth mindset is to be able to talk about those big goals that you guys have over the next year. So we certainly want to be respectful of your time and would love to wrap this episode up with a collection of real estate questions for you. But it looks like you've given us, number one, your 1-year business goal, so we don't have to repeat that again. Question number 2 we have to wrap up our episodes are, what are your 1 to 2 year personal goals? Start with you, Cody.
Well, I think Brian just alluded to earlier, it would be a huge accomplishment for me to be able to transition out of my W-2. And you talked about your motivating why. You have to have your why well established when you're getting to the business, because if your motivating why is not powerful enough, you're going to fizzle out. And for me, my motivation in this business is my time to give back to my family, because I've spent too many years missing games, missing school events, and missing opportunities with my family because I'm restricted to a W-2 schedule. And I got tired of that excuse. I got tired of letting that be a barrier to giving that time back to my family. So for me, the personal goal would definitely be to definitely get out of the W-2 for sure in the next, hopefully 24 months. I think we're well on the way here, which is exciting. And the second thing too, and this goes back to some personal development stuff. I really want to continue to work on the personal development front and get into certain masterminds. Like we were all at the networking event this weekend with Luke Wren, right? And just hearing that presentation and hearing that speech and just the power of your presence and whatnot, and just the mindset. I always want to continue to work on that. So hopefully maybe getting involved in some more personal development masterminds or mentorships as well. So.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Cody. I mean, one of my goals was definitely to be involved with Cody leaving his W-2. I mean, that would just be phenomenal. Like, I'm a little bit of a different situation. I don't have a traditional W-2 where I work a 9 to 5 or anything like that. I have a small business that's different than real estate, but that would be a huge accomplishment, I know, for me and John, if we can help Cody leave his W-2. So that's definitely on the bucket list. And along with Cody, I mean, just leveling up is really the name of the game. Personal development, real estate development, maybe even looking at we've talked about getting our CCIM and just educating ourselves more traditionally. And then also for me personally, my wife and I are hoping to start a family soon. So, we don't have any little ones running around the house yet. Definitely got some family with some nephews and things, but, I want to put my foot on the gas over the next 12, 24 months, whatever it may be, so that we can find that success and build that track record so that, I don't think this business ever gets, it's never not a lot of work, but it definitely gets easier as you build momentum and you have a team. We were at Rockstar Capital's office yesterday, and they got 20 people working for them or more. They got an acquisitions department, they got an underwriting department, they got a asset management department, they got a finance department, they got an HR department. And I don't think we're going to get there in 2 years, but we can definitely start to lay the foundation of those types of things so that we get to work on the business, not necessarily in the business so much. So if we can start to lay the foundations of that over the next couple of years, and that will allow me to have that time Cody was mentioning about, so that whenever I do have little ones running around, I'm not missing the basketball games, soccer games, baseball games, whatever it may be. So those are my personal goals for the next couple of years.
And it's going to skyrocket once Cody leaves that W-2. Going back to that mastermind this weekend that we were able to share together, you mentioned Luke Wren, who I believe is a student directly under Tony Robbins, and he's the master of personal development. So it's fair to say that Luke Wren's message probably had a little bit of real estate in it, but was focused on personal development and really showed you the strong value of that. How can I, Stephen, or the listeners help you guys? And how do we contact you?
Well, I definitely would tell you guys that this is a big help for us, being able to get on your show and spread our message and such. And so I think just being able to broadcast that out to your network, and hopefully that yielding us connections with people we haven't met before, that would be absolutely wonderful. And, we always want to continue the ongoing relationship with you guys, of course, for sure. But As far as you can get in contact with us, you can connect with us directly via email. You can catch us at Cody or Brian at blueoakinvest.com. You can also check out our website, www.blueoakinvest.com. We have a lot of great content there. We have our blog and our podcast and some other great resources there for you. And if you want to connect with us on social media, both Brian and I are very, very active across Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. So you can check us at Cody Laughlin or at Brian Alfaro on LinkedIn, and we'd be happy to connect with you there.
We're easy to get a hold of, I promise.
If you can't find us, it's, I don't know, you're kind of living under a rock.
Now, once I go to LinkedIn today, I'm going to see the Blue Oak is going to start up my feed right there. So now you guys are impossible not to see on social media, which is a major component in your thought platform. So we really appreciate you guys being on today. It had massive value, and I'm going to have a lot of what you guys said today top of mind because it works great. So thank you once again, guys, for being here today, and we'll talk to you very soon.
Well,
no, thank you, Bill. Thank you, Stephen. We really appreciate the opportunity.
Guys.
Very humbled, and we look forward to staying connected.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.
Awesome.